I'm spiritual, but not religious. How many times have we heard that? Over the years, I've conducted many a wedding, and often after those weddings, I'm invited back with my wife and to the reception, and usually I wear my dog collar as part of the gig, and invariably we join a table of friends or family, and people are immediately uncomfortable because they're sitting next to the priest. They're not sure what to do, but eventually everyone relaxes, and after a glass of red or two, usually one of the guests will say to me, "Listen, Stephen, I'm not religious, but I'm deeply spiritual." Now, what usually happens after that is that we become engaged in a very long discussion about life and death, about relationships, intimacy, hope and yearning. And at the end of the evening, usually we've had a great night, and people often thank me for the opportunity to talk about all these things. Now, isn't it curious that when I wear the dog collar and I have the official face of institutional religion, people are uncomfortable, yet on the other hand, they want to talk about the things that matter, things of the spirit. I want us to explore just for a moment this distinction between the spiritual and the religious. Now, on the one hand, of course, if I was amongst my learned theological friends, we would dismiss this distinction as superficial, as, part of the fashion of the day, that we know better, that in the history of religion there have been important things that have been wrestled with and communities that have made significant contributions, and that often this excuse for spirituality, or the multiplicity of spiritualities that are proliferating in the world, is an excuse for the banal, or for things that don't really count. So one response to this distinction between the religious and the spiritual is a kind of in-house snobbery, that we within the church or within the academy don't take this distinction seriously, so we dismiss it. On the other hand, the distinction is profound. It is important. The great Lutheran theologian, the martyr of the Second World War, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, was aware of the problems of institutional religion, its abuses of power, its failure of nerve. And so Bonhoeffer's longing was for a religionless Christianity. The great philosopher Derrida, he particularly in later years saw the value of religion, but also saw the problems with the institution. So he would talk about religion without religion. So there's a recognition of the foibles of, in particular, the institutional church, and how sometimes our structures, our processes, our preoccupation with privilege and with power and position get in the way. So the distinction between religion and spirituality, whilst it's not a simple distinction, is an important one. And I suspect in the next few years, certainly in the West, where I'm comfortable with and I can appreciate, but I even suspect globally, we need a new sense of the spiritual. By that, I'm not saying that we all should believe the same, but when we look at the problems in the world, and I'm thinking immediately now with the pandemic and the almost refusal to share resources and help countries who can't afford the vaccine, but I'm also thinking in the long term about the problems with the environment, with climate change and all the issues that we now face, that the globe itself is in danger, and that because of economic self-interest and political squabbling, we don't seem to be getting closer to a solution. So what I'm flagging is not a solution, but I'm underlining the importance and the power of the spiritual, whether it's Christian, Buddhist or Islamic spirituality, pagan or otherwise. There's something about human beings when we get in touch with a deep sense of longing, with an appreciation of the sacred, that moves us to a different space. And I suspect that the way forward in addressing some of the global problems is a rekindling of the sense of the value of the spiritual. Now, let me just pause for a moment and explore a little bit more what I mean by the spiritual. Recently, Prince Philip of the United Kingdom has died. And, politically, I am all for Australia, as an example, being independent of the Commonwealth. Ironically, however, if his funeral is televised, I will be glued to the set. There's something about the pomp and circumstance which I find appealing despite my political and social views. There's something about the splendour, the spectacle that touches something in me, a longing or a yearning for something deeper. Human beings for centuries have this sense of longing or yearning. Historically, we've often projected that sense of longing or yearning onto institutions or leaders of institutions, whether it's kings or popes, queens or bishops. They have become the focal point or the locus of this sense of longing. Now, the things I'm exploring today are about exploring this sense of yearning or longing in a different way, that rather than projecting it onto some institution or to some other figure, but to searching deep within. And I'm putting this in the context of, within the Christian tradition, this is known as the season of Easter. It's a season where we celebrate transformation, new beginnings and renewal. I'm putting it in the context of this time of renewal, of new beginnings. So, and this bears repeating, rather than looking for the solution in an institution or in a figure, looking for external signs of hope, I'm suggesting we cultivate a new sense for appreciating the sacred and listening to the signs of longing and yearning within. The theologian Paul Tillich often used to talk about, there's one classic example, a sermon he did called The Depth of Existence. And in Tillich's thinking, he was an existentialist theologian. He was very much focused on the here and now. And in this wonderful brief sermon, he talked about an attitude of rather than looking to the sky or looking to the future 10,000 years from now, it was about being attentive, being present to the here and now. That the moment we are in, this moment, this instant, is pregnant with possibilities of encounter with the sacred within the world itself, the sacred within relationships, the sacred within solitude, within the created order. It's only a very simple sermon, but it's one that challenges our way of thinking, which causes us to pause and to reflect. So this, for me, is an important starting place in terms of cultivating a renewed sense of spirituality. I'm not saying that we dispense with the institutions, but we take responsibility. We are accountable for our own spiritual life. And in the process, we cultivate a new way of seeing, of listening, of being attending. Now, for my part, in order to do that, I have to often withdraw myself from the hustle and bustle Personally, I'm going through a job change at the moment. I'm leaving a formal institutional role, and I'm going to concentrate on writing and other forms of communication, maybe dabbling in the media. But I don't know what that looks like. What I do know is that I need to withdraw, place myself in a position of solitude, whether that's going to the art gallery and staring at a painting, a Clarice Beckett, or Arthur Boyd, or going to the beach. It may be for a day, it may be for a week or for a month. There's something about withdrawing myself from the hustle and bustle and being still and beginning again to be attentive to life, both what's happening around me and the interior life. It's picking up some of the themes in that Tillich sermon of an attentiveness, a listening, a watching, a waiting. It's about seeing the sacred is here, that we live and breathe and move and exist within the sacred, and having an attentiveness to the small signs of sacred within. So whilst I might be the first to critique the institutional church, if we go back to the ministry of Jesus and the early Christian communities, in many ways what Jesus cultivated and some of the early mystics practiced was an attentiveness to the sacred within relationships, within the created order. It was about, in some instances, withdrawing from everything, going into the wilderness, developing that capacity to be still, or it was about going into the world and engaging with others and attending to others. If we go back to that original example I gave, when I go to these weddings, I'm wearing the dog collar and everyone's anxious because they're sitting next to a priest and is he going to be religious? One of the interesting things that happens in these engagements is that not only do I find that people like to talk about themselves and their life, their values, their hopes, their fears and their aspirations, but as I move out of my own cynical frame, as I move out of that kind of practiced politeness, and as I become engaged with the people at my table, as I begin to listen and to attend, not only is it good for them, but it's good for me, that I have, in a sense, transcended my own anxieties, put aside for the moment at least my own foibles, and I have engaged with someone else. And there's a kind of connection there, a profound connection. Let's even call it spiritual. We are in a time of great crisis, and I don't think there are any simple answers. But there is something about the sacred in nature, the sacred in relationships, the sacred that we discover in beauty, in art, in solitude, which restores our life, gives us a new sense of dignity and purpose, which, if we are interested in organised religion, it gives religion a new sense of purpose and integrity. Or if we're doing it solo, it encourages us on the journey. So maybe it's time for all of us, regardless of our persuasion, to encourage each and every one of us on this journey to go deeper, to attend to the moment, to discover the spiritual in order that we and our world may be transformed. Amen.